Sony continues to ramp up their anti-consumer practices, and they're getting away with it. One of the more interesting things this last week in video games that has gone completely under the radar is what they are doing with Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, you might have heard, maybe not, that there is a remaster coming. What a surprise, Sony doing a remaster for this game. It's only 7 years old, it's perfectly playable on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, it has a PC version, but still, it's getting the remastered treatment. That's not surprising. What is that it's replacing the previous version of the game. This comes with a ton of issues. Now, people already suspected this was happening because they removed Horizon from PlayStation Plus about 3 months ago, and now they've delisted it from PlayStation Network, so the previously cheap Horizon Zero Dawn doesn't exist anymore, and now you can only buy the twice as expensive remastered version. So not only are they erasing the existence of the previous game without us really knowing what changes are in the remaster or if they are changes that people indeed would like, which normally, if you just leave both versions of the game existing, wouldn't be an issue, but that's not what they're doing. What Sony's doing here is making as much money as possible on their old games as they can, and I'm pretty sure, I'm willing to bet, and I'm not a betting man, that we're gonna see this done more. They're going to delist old games and then remaster them in one way or another and sell them for higher prices just to keep that making money. But on PC, it gets much worse, because the game has been delisted from Steam and Epic Games. And the new remaster, like all of Sony's recent games, comes with a new requirement: PlayStation Network. You need a PlayStation Network account, and you need to link it to your Steam account and be online the first time you start up the game in order to play it. The original Horizon Zero Dawn didn't have this requirement, and so you could sell it worldwide, which this new one, they can't. Because let me remind you, in case you forgot from the whole Helldivers 2 debacle, there's over 170 different countries that don't have PlayStation Network. And to clarify a couple of things, if you own it, you still can. It's still in your library. It's not going anywhere as far as we know. You can pay $10 to get the remastered version if you already own it once it's out, but you can just not upgrade and be fine. Unless you're in one of those 170 plus regions. Then you can keep it in your library, but you will not be offered the remaster, and it's completely delisted. Of course, the physical version of the game for console is still there, and you can probably find it, and this just reminds us why physical media and hardware that can play it is important for game preservation, but also you can buy Horizon Zero Dawn Complete Edition on Good Old Games. No DRM, no online requirements, no nothing. That version of the game, thanks to Good Old Games, is going to still exist and be an option for people. Now, this whole situation has various layers, and we're going to go through them. First, there's the layer of it being essentially a scam for Sony to make as much money as possible on each of their games, and how it includes a lot of very shady business tactics. The second one is the impact that this has on PC and what is Sony's overall strategy for PC, because as I'm going to show you later, they need the PC market, at least for the amount of money that they're spending on making games versus how much they're making back. And the third layer of this is how nobody's able to stop them from doing this. So hi, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. Yes, I know we are over 50,000 subscribers. I didn't think it was going to be that fast. I have an appointment to cut my hair. It's coming, don't worry. Remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video, because this one is probably going to get dislike bombed by Sony fanboys that think that I hate Sony. I have 2 PlayStation tattoos. You can love something and still criticize the business side of it. Like, come on. Here's this clip for a transition for no reason except that I think it's really funny.
No cap, let's go!
So let's start off with that scam part of it. And this one is important. Now, Horizon Zero Dawn has been available for purchase for $20 on the PlayStation Network since June of 2018, and it's been available on PlayStation Plus. And now you can no longer buy it at that price. Instead, what Sony is saying is that you can upgrade to the remastered edition for $10, or if you already own the game, hey, you can keep it as is, no problem. However, if you wanted to buy the game right now, you can't. You just can't buy it. You need to buy the remastered version, which doesn't come out to $20 plus 10, $30. No, that's an exclusive price for loyal people who bought the game before. No, it's going to cost you $40 or $50 depending on if it's PlayStation Network or Steam or on regional pricing, all sorts of things. It really bothers me that a ton of different outlets have reported on this like it's some wonderful gift that they're giving people. Only $10 to upgrade to the remastered edition. If you got Horizon Zero Dawn for free during the Play at Home promotion, you also only have to pay $10 to get the remastered edition. When very clearly what they are doing here is taking advantage of their games and how much of Sony's games tend to sell for long periods of time and saying, hey, if you already owned it, why don't you just give us $10 and you can play the remastered version? Or more importantly, if you've never played it, look at this new marketing bump that we've given the game. Don't you want to pay close to full price for this 7-year-old game? And make no mistakes about it, remastering this game was way cheaper than making it. Comparably, the amount of effort gone into the remaster is much lower, but they stand to make a ton of money because what they're doing is inflating the price of the game all over again. Normally, that wouldn't be a big issue because you can just buy the previous version of the game. You can buy the normal one, and you still can physically, but when it comes to digital storefronts, which Sony has control over, they are not letting you. Now, math here is mathing. Sony spends a ton of money on their games, and we have plenty of public figures where Sony needs certain games like Spider-Man 2 to sell over 7 million copies at full price to break even on how much they spent on them. And because those sales aren't coming in at the rate that they would want, they need to extend the value of their games as much as possible. Before, one of those key things, and we're going to talk about PC a lot in a second, was the PC releases coming out at full price even though they were very old games. But now they're double dipping into both PC and PlayStation again by looking for quick ways to remaster a game and just pump up their value in that delisting. There is no exaggeration here that when it comes to a Sony first-party game, they are instilling right now the fear that they can be delisted at any moment and replaced for what they deem to be a superior version. And as we move towards an all-digital future, when they get rid of physical media, this is just going to get worse as they have complete and total control. What's even worse is that if this spreads throughout the industry, we're going to start seeing more games get delisted with whatever excuse people can come up with of reselling you the game or offering you some upgrade, but making sure that people who want to buy it 10 years after release, they have a reason to charge them full price still. This is a bigger deal than it looks on the surface. And while we've seen games become remastered or resold over the years, a lot of that has been games that were exclusively available physically, being updated into digital formats that you could play. Think things like Nintendo's Virtual Console. But these are just digital games that exist and just taking them away in order for them to force you into the new one. And really, it is a reminder of why physical media is important, why game preservation is important, and why things like good old games still matter. Now, this is just the money side of things, but speaking about money, let's talk about why Sony needs PC. And this isn't speculation. Helldivers 2 was the best-selling Sony game ever, and that was thanks to its 50-50 split of sales on PC and PS5. Make no mistake that those crazy goals for sales that Sony has for their games are very difficult to reach without the PC market. But that doesn't change the fact that they're doing a pretty terrible job at it. We've already seen their pretty BS saying we're listening and trying to learn the best we can how to approach the PC market and what players want. Here, let me force PSN onto single-player games, which is what they've done. They escalated from the debacle surrounding Helldivers 2, where they let everybody who bought the game initially keep playing without PSN, but then they put it in mandated. And now all of the people in over 170 countries that don't have PSN support cannot buy the game. And then they started ramping up little by little. Of course, it made sense for Concord because Concord was a multiplayer game. But Ghost of Tsushima was, hey, you don't need it for the single player, but if you want to play multiplayer, you need it. And now we arrive at God of War Ragnarok, Until Dawn, and Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, all three being single player games that require PSN accounts in order to play them. Just as I said all the way back with Helldivers, they're just gonna keep ramping this up. And here is where it gets really interesting, because Sony is trying to thread the needle on the PC market in a way that I personally find confusing. I have some assumptions of what they're trying to do, but it's still weird. See, they know they need PC enough that their live services need to release day and date on PC. Otherwise, Concord would have lasted 1 week instead of 2, and Helldivers wouldn't have been the success it was. However, they're keeping their single-player AAA titles locked behind 3 years, sometimes 4, before they release them. And now, they would rather have the PSN requirement than the money they would get from selling it worldwide. And let me clarify a bit on this topic. Sony can't just turn on those regions that they don't support for PSN. There's a lot of legal hullabaloo that they have to get through, from privacy and data all the way to certain terms and conditions of sales, just a ton of different things in order for them to operate. But what we do know is that they can just choose to not have that requirement on PC. Like I just said about Ghost of Tsushima, they can even have it only for the multiplayer portion of their games, but they choose to force people into it. That means they value getting people into the PlayStation Network ecosystem more than whatever they calculate the sales in all of those other places. But that's very clearly saying that they don't care about the customer at all. And one of the other things I've heard often is, why don't those other regions just make PlayStation Network accounts in a region that's supported? And that is exactly what they do on their PS5s. Many of those regions, people just make accounts elsewhere, and on the console itself, it's not that complicated to get it working, not to mention that it's very popular in those regions to buy a lot of PSN prepaid cards and a lot of physical media. But when it comes to Steam, if you want to switch regions, you need a valid payment method for the region that you're switching to, and that is a lot more difficult. Basically, Steam works as a second layer of protection, because even if you do have the PSN account, you need to be in that region for products with regional restrictions to show up. So these games just don't exist. And the reasons that Sony places so much value on those PSN numbers is because they get to pad up their PSN statistics, their playtimes, their trophies, their engagement, all of these things. But also, you now have a PSN account. They probably have some numbers saying that people with a PSN account are more likely to buy a PlayStation for some reason. And we all know that what they would really like to do is come out with their own launcher, their own PC storefront down the line, similar to Xbox or Uplay, because that way they can get around the 30% standard fee that Steam takes from game sales, although I imagine for Sony they probably have a deal where it's lower. And that's why they keep forcing people into PSN. But at the end of the day, all those 170 plus regions that don't have support are still PlayStation fans, just that they have to skirt around terms of service with no guarantee of support in the future. And even then, they support Sony, and to me that's just sad. And now if you're in those regions and wanted to play on PC, you have to go through double the amount of loops and double the amount of terms of service where you could get your account terminated just to play games that for many people, jumping through those hoops is basically impossible. Now, I've already painted a very good picture, I hope, of how this trend of maintaining games' value over time seems to be forming. And I'm not saying Sony is in a great situation overall with their live service dreams and lack of meaningful exclusives, in my opinion, on PS5, but it seems that they really want their games to have a very long tail, and they figured out that remasters of some sort or another are going to help keep the value of the games up and making money for very long periods of time. You then have to combine it with the fact that Sony needs PC to really make as much money as they want to off of each investment, off of each game that they produce, but they're using the PC market for whatever they want with some plans down the line. Yeah, for live service games, PC gamers are really important right off the bat, but for single-player games, you're kind of treated as a second-class citizen and forced into what is essentially PlayStation Network DRM, which I don't like that. I buy a game on Steam, that should be the only requirement. I have a PlayStation 5. I own every PlayStation console currently, and I still don't like the idea of linking my PSN account to my Steam account. and it's normal for people to not want to do that. But the final part of it all that makes me really scared is that now Sony has a complete control over their segment of the console market. While the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo in general, arguably since the GameCube, but from the Wii at least, has been on their island doing their thing, just trying to exist where they want and finding a ton of success, the more hardcore traditional market has shifted a lot. Gaming overall has grown, obviously. I can grab my iPad, connect a Bluetooth gamepad, open the Netflix app, and play Hades. That's a real thing that you can do right now. But what hardcore gamers, quotation marks there, normally associate with boxed console experiences has changed a lot. And the Xbox Series and PS5 are really just PCs at a much better price in exchange for not being a PC. They're just for games and locked to their ecosystem. Now that Xbox has kind of bowed out of the console race, Sony stands atop alone in a very strange position, because as a console manufacturer and as a publisher of their first-party games, they've kind of been lacking a little bit, and they do need the help of PC to get over the finish line with what they want in terms of money. But when it comes to just boxes being sold, the consoles themselves, that will always be popular to some extent or another, people will buy consoles, put them under their TV, and play video games, they're uncontested. And as they control more of the market, and as they probably for a PlayStation 6 completely phase out a disc drive, for example, the sort of practices of remastering and delisting and forcing certain price points onto people is just worse. They can do more of that without competition to contest them. I like to remind people that when the Xbox One was announced at E3, they said it would have always online DRM, and you couldn't share your games because they would be registered to the console you put them in. The very next day, Sony said they weren't doing that. They even had time in those 24 hours to film a sketch of how to share games on PlayStation, and it was just giving the other person the disc. There's a lot of logical theories, not conspiracies, logical ones, that Xbox made that move having spoken with Sony that this was the direction moving forward because everybody stood to make more money by cutting out the used games market entirely. But when Xbox received such backlash immediately upon revealing that, Sony just backpedaled and decided that they could win that entire generation in one strike, and they did. That is what happens when there is competition. Back when we had 3 or 4 different consoles, all of them had to offer customers the best price, the best performance for that price, the best exclusives, and the best service, because everybody was competing for the customer's money. In a world where PlayStation is just the standard in their corner of the market, they will be able to enforce whatever they want. They will raise PS Plus prices, they will take away certain benefits from different tiers, they'll take away the disc drive, they'll delist games, pump out a remaster with controversial changes that nobody likes, erase the history of it just so they can charge you full price for an 8-year-old game, and nobody will be able to stop them. We're already seeing that happen right now with Horizon Zero Dawn. What's to stop them in the future when they take over even more control? Now, thankfully, from my opinion, which I'm very aware that you haven't asked for, but I'm going to give it to you anyways, I think Sony right now is pretty short-sighted and not doing a very good job. Their live service endeavors seem to be a money sink, which might be leading to them trying out these little scummy monetization tactics to keep the value of their games up. They want to make sure they keep making money because a lot of what they've invested in doesn't seem like it's panning out. A lot of customers, despite the success of the PlayStation console itself, aren't happy with Sony and the games that they're putting out. When it comes to the PC market, they're doing pretty well with their threading the needle strategy. And even though there's only criticism the moment that the games come out, look at God of War Ragnarok, for example. Tons of negative reviews of requiring PSN, but now the game's doing fine. People just accepted it and move on because that's how that slow ramping up of these methods works. But there is still a certain backlash from the PC community on how they're being treated. And I think that if all of these things combine, we could see Sony not fail, but at least have enough of a humbling blow that they're forced to move back on some of these decisions and actually answer some of the criticism. But these are the moments where that sort of stuff starts, with you being aware of what they're doing so that we can complain when it happens and vote with our wallets moving forward. But this news story has been completely buried under tons of articles of, yay, Remastered Horizon, only $10 if you own it. Let's go, guys. Let's ignore everything else that's happening here that Sony literally said nothing about and just went, poof, we delisted this thing, now pay us more. So look, it's not doom and gloom. I don't know where this is headed, but it's a very bad omen. And it's something that we definitely need to keep an eye out for. Because a dominant position in the market where they can make big decisions unchecked, they might just straddle the line perfectly of unpopular decisions that end up being accepted regardless. They really need to make a big blunder, or a blunder big enough for consumers to make noise around it, to really kind of steer the ship of Sony a little bit back on course. Because I'm not getting a good feeling from this decision and a lot of the previous decisions that Sony has made, including Concord and every single report about how they're developing games in their bubbles of toxic positivity. And I think you should be aware of this, you should know what they're doing, and you should especially be careful of this becoming a trend wider in the industry. In any case, I've been Mug. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. I think this is a really big story, man. I don't know why nobody wants to talk about it. I guess it's just because it doesn't get clicks, and maybe this video won't get clicks either. But it's bad. Like, honestly. A ton of thanks for watching all the way through. Now that we're at 50,000 subscribers and that haircut is incoming, I don't have anything to say here at the end. I guess the next milestone will be 75,000 subscribers, which those numbers are scary, but I don't know what incentive to place, so I don't know. Tell me in the comments below what you'd like to see. Maybe I could dye my hair whatever color people vote for or something like that. I could do a boring YouTuber Q&A. Those are always relatively successful. I don't know. The important thing is that I'm very, very grateful that you're here and that you're watching. Thank you. And an extra special thanks to my patrons up on the increasingly full $1 patron wall. I'm really happy about that. We're gonna have some changes to it coming soon, which I think are gonna be really fun. But these guys support everything I do, and if you're interested in joining, you can check the link in the description below. And as always, go out there, enjoy some great video games, and I'll see you again very soon.